Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today as we talk about a multi-vendor approach to building automation. And I'm from Smith Engineering. I'm Megan Kilpatrick, and I'm just going to cover a couple housekeeping items, and then I'm going to hand it over to our presenters. First off, if you're not speaking, please stay muted. There'll be a lot of people on the call, and that just helps out, but there will certainly be opportunity to have discussion. So feel free to unmute when we're actually talking, and would be happy to see faces. It is certainly not a requirement, but it's a small group, and we're hoping to have a really productive conversation and learn about each campus and how things are going. So as we go through, there's going to be a few spots where the presenters will ask some questions of you all. You are welcome to put those right in the chat. Also, along the way, if you have questions for the presenters, you can put those in chat. If it pertains to what they're talking about, they might answer it along the way, or we will have plenty of time at the end after they get through their slides that we can go over any questions that you had along the way or new questions that you have at the end. So we're hoping for a good discussion and to learn from you all and to meet some new people today. So I'm going to hand it over to Matt Machowski, who is controlling the slide deck.
There we go. As Meg said, my name is Matt Machowski. A little bit about myself. I previously worked for Siemens Building Automation for 25 years out of the Philadelphia branch. Project engineer, project manager, operations manager, played a little technician every now and again as well while I was working there. Came over to BEP in 2023, and I'm the operations manager here now. Next, I'll let Bill take it next.
Thanks, Matt. Yep, I'm Bill Broadhurst. I'm a VP of Operations at Smith Engineering. I joined in 2024. Prior to that, as the slide says, 15 years as the Director of Campus Energy at Princeton University, where I did manage building automation and controls, as well as the energy conservation program. Prior to Princeton, 13-year career at a New York, New Jersey energy engineering firm, where I started as an engineer and worked my way up to ops manager. And then prior to that was Merchant Marine Academy and being trained to operate engine rooms on ships. I'll turn it over to Adam now.
Hi, I'm Adam Bolts. I'm currently the Director of Building Automation and Performance at Princeton. My past is I spent 15 years with Siemens. Prior to coming to the university, I worked in a control shop for a year, and then I worked underneath Bill as controls engineer for 10 years prior to me becoming a director in December.
All right, I'm going to kick things off with your building automation system. You have hardware and software. You also have your people who install it, your installers, come in a variety of flavors. You have great hardware, software. Some companies have less good hardware and software. Some areas have great installers, and some areas have installers that could use some work. If you have a great hardware and great installer combination, you're going to wind up in that top right-hand corner, that green smiley face. You're pretty happy with the way your things are run on your campus. Installer's not so great. The hardware platform is not so great as well. You don't really enjoy it. It's cumbersome. You're going to wind up in that bottom left frowny face area of the table. And you just have some great software, but not great installer. So maybe the projects don't get installed great, but your ease of use and the cost of it is right where you want to be. Kind of met. You're okay with the situation. Same thing happens if you have a great local installer, but the hardware's not great. He has enough quality people where he can overcome the issues in his system. This kind of simplifies everything that you have out there. And over time, great installers may become not so great installers. People who have great hardware and software platforms may change their platform to something you don't like anymore. Or they may have something out there that you don't like and they change it for the better. So the trick is you want to try to stay out of that bottom left-hand corner. So I'm sure everybody has their own BAS situation on campus right now. If you want to take a moment and rate your satisfaction with what you have on your campus right now in the chat. curious how many twos there are. Next, I'm going to talk about a little industry overview. As years have progressed, HVAC systems have become a lot more complex. The HVAC systems themselves have become more complex as we look for more energy savings. We're doing a lot more third-party integrations to other systems out there now, whether they be lighting, whether they be water systems and things like that for animal rooms. And we have a lot more IT involvement nowadays, which adds a layer of complexity. The old days of everything running on an RS-485 network are pretty much done. Everybody's systems now sit on an IT network. Right now, there's a talent shortage in the BAS industry. We're all fighting for the same grade A players. There's a shortage of technicians out there who've been around for a while. There's been some consolidation in the industry lately. Some of the better, smaller companies have been bought up by some of the bigger companies. Right now, if you have a lab on your campus, most lab solutions are typically done by a third-party BAS installer, not your normal BAS installer. There's one exception to that rule, which is Siemens, who has their own lab product. You have a lot more open systems now, whether it be BACnet or LAN. I think BACnet is the preferred one on most people's campus. And you're doing a lot more data analytics right now with FDD and commissioning on your campuses. So that's kind of where the industry is right now. I'm going to turn this over to Bill Broadhurst next. He'll give you a little history about Princeton University and where they have been.
Thanks, Matt. So yeah, we're going to go through a timeline of the building automation history at Princeton University. And yes, we'll start in the late 70s, early 80s, like this slide shows. And believe it or not, a lot of the decisions that were made back then, in some ways, we're still living with them. So our decisions that we make in building automation and controls can have long-term consequences, some good and some not so good. There's a history, not just of Princeton in here and the decisions that Princeton made, and I definitely want to highlight some of the key decision points that Princeton made throughout its history when it came to controls. But then also there's a corporate history, for lack of a better word, where something happens on the controls company's side where things just change. And like Matt said, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. So of course, this is going to be Princeton's story here, and I'll be turning it over to Adam to go over the current state of affairs at Princeton in a couple of minutes. But just to get this timeline started, you'll see that Princeton was an early adopter of digital systems back in the 70s. And the first system they picked was a Hamilton system, which was a UTC subsidiary. And as it says on the slide, UTC eventually bought Carrier. And so Princeton, out of the gate, became a Carrier campus with a lot of installed base of Carrier equipment. But then you see down there a company called MCC Powers. And then they get acquired by Landis and Gear and got bought by Electric Watt. That's what eventually became Siemens. What happened is Carrier back then, just like today, doesn't necessarily have a true lab solution. So they have to partner with people for lab projects. And so Princeton, a lot of the growth at Princeton from the 70s to today is, of course, in the research environment, in the labs, in the clean rooms, in the animal facilities. And so that lab partner is key to the success of building automation and controls. So that history that you see there, some of that's what we call Siemens infrastructure was installed much earlier prior to the company becoming Siemens. So we can go to the next slide and we'll see that the trend continues with the campus being pretty much dual source between Siemens and Carrier, very much influenced by Siemens being one of the few, probably still one of the few that can turnkey a lab project with a lot of their own parts. Whereas like even with ALC and some others, they have to partner with third parties, and that might give them a competitive disadvantage, since maybe sometimes it doesn't. But so it was dual source between Siemens and Carrier for a long time. But then you see in 2004, something happened with Carrier. They bought ALC, Automated Logic. And so that was a big shakeup to Carrier customers. So we started piloting ALC dealers, and that's when I came onto the board with the university in that 06 to 09 time period there. So I was there for this. It says there in 2006, Honeywell acquires Tritium. Princeton didn't start using Tritium until much farther down the timeline, but I just put it there just to show that it's just a point in time where one of the platforms that Princeton eventually used was acquired by Honeywell. In 2009, the central plant had become a lot more complex. It had cogen put in 95. It had thermal storage put in 2004. So as it became more complex and as Carrier was transitioning more to an ALC style front end, the central plant decided to go more towards PLCs and switched everything to Allen Bradley. And since then, the plants got even more complex. There's now 2 satellite geothermal plants on the campus that have to integrate and work well together. And then in 2010, we decided to, because we had a big growth plan ahead of us, as a lot of campuses do. So we did what we call a DDC master plan. And I'm not going to read all those sub bullets there, but it's just where you try to plan as well as possible for several millions of square feet of construction. So everything from doing an inventory, looking at your staffing, comparing yourself to peers, involving your IT department. Even Princeton didn't start putting panels on IP until the 2000s. So even in 2010, the IT side of building automation at Princeton was still early on, didn't have the big installed base that it has today. So we really involved the IT department for the first time in our planning. Of course, we looked at procurement options, et cetera, all the things you see there. And go to the next slide, Matt. And the outcome of that master plan was exactly what it says at the top of the slide there, was the dual source between Siemens and ALC. But it was ALC the branch. So even though we piloted with the dealer and it was successful, for the size of our projects and the risks involved, the branch was a much better fit for Princeton. So we continue down the timeline there due to various reasons on both sides. On the ALC side, this is 2016 there. We had to actually start bringing in some dealers to help out on the service side, and that was because even the ALC branch, they lost a lot of people at that time. The situation has since changed again. So like even 2016 is almost 10 years ago. It's kind of hard to believe. So ALC the branch went through a little bit of time there where they were losing people. And then we had to make some big decisions when Siemens went away from Insight and went towards DeZigo. And so you'll see there a lot of due diligence took place over the course of several years that included COVID. So there's a little bit of a pause there. That led to, and Adam's going to talk a little bit more about this because this is where projects are active and hot right now at Princeton. And so now the projects are bid between Distech and ALC, and Distech uses the Tritium front end, and Princeton's in the process of migrating the legacy Siemens Insight buildings to a Tritium front end. So hopefully that timeline kind of showed how Princeton had to plan for the future for their own growth, address the procurement side of things, but you have to respond to the market as well and what's happening with these platforms and with their staffing. So that's it for the timeline. Matt, if you can go to the next slide. So this question, please answer in the chat. How many different brands of building automation systems do you have in your campus? And how many installers are you working with currently? And if you don't know the exact number, be approximate.
Wow, 17 to 18 different brands.
Wow.
Might win.
We're going to talk about that at the end and how you manage that.
Yes. Okay, what's the...
And Mike, are you the Mike? Are you the Mike Hoffman from my past? It's been 20 years, probably.
The one and only, Bill. The one and only.
Hi, Mike.
It's good to see you, man.
Same here.
I guess
Okay. Any
Other,
other double digits? Or is everybody else the single digits?
guess I can
Yeah, so Adam, you can take it from here.
take it from here on the slide, and then we can come back to the anyone beats Michael. Um, yeah, so I'm going to talk about current state of affairs at Princeton. A little bit of history where we were. If you can see on this slide, back to 2010, and this is basically when what Bill talked about when they had the master plan written. And you can see we had building automation, about 100 buildings. We're up to about 188 right now, and even since this was done, we probably have a couple more. And the point count you can see has just exploded in the last 14 years. The next slide you'll really see where we track that, but in the last few years, basically the last 2 years, we've almost doubled. And part of that is building about 3 million square feet on campus and also doing a lot of renovations of buildings. If you look at the next ALC building, you can see we were only at 2, and that's when we first started. We're up to about 55 buildings now. So the campus is probably about 75% Siemens controllers and 25% automated logic, roughly. And then we also have a small DizTech footprint now. Even since that number 3 buildings is probably up to 5 buildings now, we're slowly transitioning that. Nemostat buildings, we're very close to being done with a Nemostat. And carrier is actually done now. We have no carrier, just a small handful of terminal equipment controllers that we've migrated to integration. Siemens is the main part, is the biggest on campus. So you can see 137 buildings. You can go to the next slide, Matt. So here's where I'll give you a slide of basically how we've been tracking our point count, and does a couple things just so we know what we have out there, and secondly, to help with manpower and deciding like when we need to start adding manpower because of the amount of buildings, amount of points we have. The huge explosion here from the third controls engineer in 21, 22 till now is we've built a few buildings, and we're also doing steam to hot water migrations. So basically we're taking buildings, we're going to a geo exchange, and while we're doing that, we're taking the opportunity to add controls, and so we can do trending. A lot of it's in dorms. So even in a dorm, you think there's how much controls can you have, but you have occupancy, we're monitoring window switches, anything we can do to help save energy, and doing cutbacks when the students leave, things of that nature. Part of the current plan that we're doing, Bill was talking about migrating to Niagara. So we're doing about 750 around panels. We have to get moved from Siemens Insight to Tritium Niagara. And we had a mix of panels. Some were Siemens P2 hardwire, RS-45, some were P2 Ethernet. So we're doing 2 things. We're firmware upgrades on the panels that can take a BACnet firmware upgrade, and P2s we're actually either changing out to DizTech controllers or upgrading to a new Siemens fuel panel PXEA. And most of the time we're doing that because of terminal equipment controllers. We have about 30,000 terminal equipment controllers on campus, and as most of you probably know, they'll outlive the building. So a VAV controller, unless it gets wet or fried or something like that, it's going to stay running for, probably longer than your building is, or until another retrofit's done.
All right, we're gonna go back to me. We have a couple different examples of types of BASs you can have on your campus, except Michael with the 18. I did not put that on the slide. You can either sole source somebody, you can have a single product with multiple installers. Stanford has that method where they had DizTech on their campus. That's the only product they installed, but they have 4 or 5 separate dealers to compete to install it on each project. The other thing is what Princeton has done in the past, the dual source products and vendors. You got 2 installers, who install separate products. And then you run into more of the Michael's issue where you have multi-vendors and 3 or more products. Now, on the left-hand side, we're going to talk about things you got to think about on how many vendors you want on campus and how you want your campus to run. One is in-house expertise. How much stuff are you going to have your guys do yourself? Princeton has a lot of in-house expertise. They do a lot. When I used to work for Siemens, it was great. They took care of all the warranty work themselves, and I just replaced parts. It was awesome. If you got sole source, it's easy and cheaper to have that expertise. You're sending people to one class. They have to learn one system. It makes it simple. As you get more to the multi-vendor with 3 or more products, it gets a lot harder. Are you sending all your personnel to learn every system in depth, or are you going to pick and choose who goes to which courses to learn what system? Service contracts and administration kind of go hand in hand here. Again, it's easier to manage one contract than it is a lot of contracts. So, how much time do you want to spend with your admin managing contracts, your staff time? Do you meet with each vendor every month to make sure things are going smoothly? How much extra time do you want your staff spending talking to vendors? Sole source, it's probably an hour meeting. You have 4 or 5 vendors who are active on campus. You may have to have your staff spend 4 to 5 hours a month talking to these people and not doing other things that they're productive with. IT. Everybody has their own IT standards. Everybody has their own backnet standards or how things are laid out on their campus. Is it easier to teach one person your standard, or is it easier to teach 5 person your standards? Where do you want to be? How many people do you want to have to keep teaching this again and again? Price risk. Again, with sole source, the greatest price risk. You're locked into one person. They're going to charge you what they feel is a fair price, and you're stuck with that. If their internal cost grows, you're going to be stuck with that. With the multi-vendor or 3 or more products, the more competition you have, the better chance you have at keeping the price down. There may be some pressure from up high on the new construction side to get as many vendors as possible to bid, because that helps the new construction side keep their prices low. The referring of vendors. Most people's systems run on BACnet. Most people have them run on the same network. Not everybody's product plays the same in the sandbox. There have been some network storms here or there where you have too much network traffic, slows down your network, you can't get alarms, things like that. And if you have multiple vendors on there, you have to go through a lot of people to find out who's at fault. You're going to have vendors point fingers at each other and saying, well, I did this little piece, that's my fault, and that guy over there did all that, and that's his fault. How much time do you want to spend refereeing the traffic on your network? Product risk. If you're sole source, that's the greatest product risk and the greatest installer risk. Anything with that product changes, you're going to either suffer if it goes bad, or if it goes to the positive, it's going to work out for you. Same thing with installer risk, as we all fight for the same amount of people. People move from job to job looking for their best dollar value, or something happens at a company and they lose a lot of quality people. You don't have a backup plan with a sole source installer. Where if you have multiple vendors and multiple products on your site, if one guy goes bad, you just lean heavier onto the 2 or 3 guys that are still there. And in the middle of that road, you have that dual source product and vendor, where one guy goes bad, you still have another guy you can lean on while you bring somebody else on, which is kind of what Princeton has done. And a lot of this depends on where are you at too. What kind of options of installers do you have that around you? Some places may only have one or 2 options. Or if you live in the Northeast quarter, you probably have lots and lots of options around Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, and DC. There's a lot of installers to choose from. So what it comes down to is, when you're looking at how many vendors to have on campus, you need to take in all these considerations as well as your location. And in the end, it's just finding out what works best for you. And sometimes finding out what works best for you is talk to your other campuses and find out what they do and what works for them.